Yeah. Welcome to the Creative Academy, your go-to source for accountability, coaching, and community for writers. I'm Donna Barker, and today I'm talking to Crystal Stranaghan, aka CJ Hunt, about writing to plan or writing to a plan. And I want to start with a little context here. I've been working with Crystal as a business partner for almost 2 years. And one thing that astounds me is how she manages to run a successful business-to-business consulting firm, which includes business to author, write her own fiction, be in development and launch with our joint project, the Creative Academy, and still take regular holidays where she really does disappear and focus on her family and self-care. So when you talk about productivity and time management, Crystal, I listen. So, and that's what I'd love to hear your thoughts about today, writing to a plan. So why don't you first, in your own words, tell us all the things you're working on, maybe starting with your 40 by 40 challenge, since that in and of itself could be worthy of a whole, how do you manage it conversation?
All right. Yeah, so I decided at one of our team retreats, and this is something I do with my staff in the business side of things every 3 months or so. We talk about what our goals are for the next 3 months. We talk about our long-term goals, our short-term goals, and how all those pieces in our creative lives fit in with our business lives. And then we try to create something that's going to mesh them successfully. And so what I found myself writing in my notebook just over a year ago was I wrote 40 by 40 and then I put a big box around it, and I didn't even really know what that meant at that time, but it was in the context of writing in my creative work, because I do have a tendency to let that get sidelined if there's a lot of other responsibilities to be had. So I really, the last couple of years, have been putting the focus on trying to make sure that my projects don't just get backburnered all the time, and that I actually can make some progress. So I, in a moment of what seemed like insanity, but turned out to be inspiration, decided that I was going to write 40 stories in my world, which is River's End, by my 40th birthday, which at the time was about 18 months away. So as you can imagine, there were some direct tie-ins to how exactly I was going to manage my time to make that happen, since in the previous 3 years, I had managed to write 0.
Right.
So I needed to scale that up and actually get some things done. So yeah, that was that.
And so you are actually on, and within the community of writers that you're connected with, there were some of us who looked at that and worked with you really closely and were able to say, yeah, you go, we know you can do this. And then there were others who were a little less optimistic and were worried that you might be setting yourself up for failure. So can you just address, like, you set yourself an ambitious writing goal, and you needed clearly to have something in place to allow you to reach that, because you're still running a business and you're starting a new business, and your husband still loves you and your family still gets time with you. So how are you able to manage that piece of it, where you've got some people saying, I don't know if you can do it, and yet you put in place this piece where you actually can?
Yeah, and I think the first few months after I made that decision was a really interesting testing ground for what processes were going to work to do that. And, I think it's just like it's the same principles as apply to our business. When we started scaling up and we went beyond the company being just me, and we hired a bunch of people and we started taking on more, we had to have actual systems in place. It wasn't enough for me to just know how the things were done. I had to be able to communicate that to other people. I had to be able to replicate it consistently. And I didn't have a lot of processes necessarily at that point. So my husband, that's his specialty, is designing systems of things that will work. And so he stepped in and helped develop a system that would work within what works for me. And I think a lot of people get kind of horrified when they think about organization and time management and systems and process in terms of their creative work. There's this sort of recoiling of, this is going to prevent me from being creative, and I'm going to be shoved in a little corporate box and I'm going to be stuck there. But actually having the systems means you don't have to figure out how to do it each time. You just do it. So you actually can open yourself up more, I think, creatively with the content than you can if you're having to reinvent the wheel. And reinventing your system or process for writing a book or creating a story or doing something creative each time means that you're losing that time every single project, because you're spending what little time you might have figuring it out, not actually making the thing.
Okay, so what do you mean by your process? Like, are you referring to apps and tools, or is it a mindset? What does that mean?
It's a combination, actually. So my writing process, it took me those first 8 stories done in quite tight succession, and I sort of refined each time. So the first book that I wrote was Silver Bells, and I did it for Nano it was 2014, so I guess actually 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a process. I mean, I had a whole other book mapped out that I'd been working on for a really long time, and I was gonna finish that, darn it. And I sat down at my keyboard the first day of Nano, and I started writing a completely different book. So I had no outline. I had no idea who the characters were. It just started coming and I wrote it. So I just went with that. So I had zero process the first time. I sort of stumbled through, I got it edited, and, you know, I just sort of released it on Christmas Day as a present to the world, as a thanks for helping me out kind of thing, and being supportive. Well, I've been saying for 20 years, I'm going to write a romance book. And so when I came time to write the next one, which was 3 years later, which I think was a good indication, I didn't know how I did the first one. I didn't know why it worked. And so I didn't know where to start to do the second one. So I just kind of delayed and delayed and delayed. So when it came time to do that second one, I didn't have a starting place. And so the characters turned out to be the starting place for me. And I started kind of developing the characters and dumping my ideas into my journals, and some into Scrivener and some into Google Docs and some into Evernote. You know, I love tools. I have all of them. But you don't need all of them for everything. So it was figuring out which of my business tools would work in a creative context and which would not, and really trying to simplify it and make it work in what I was trying to do. So I do now, after evolving it, have a very specific process of how I go about writing a story. And I do start with the characters, and I brainstorm into a Google Doc generally. And then once I have enough to work with, I move into Scrivener for that project. And I use the emotional wound thesaurus, the positive and negative trait thesaurus, and those are kind of the base of the character development stage. And I work through with those tools to set my characters and what they want and what they're all about. Right. And then I actually go into plotting things out. And now that I've done this a few times, I've adapted the Romancing the beat sheet, which is a really helpful short little book, but brilliant. And I didn't realize she already had a Scrivener template made, so I built my own
one. Yeah.
That would work for my process, which I think was valuable to just adapt it really specifically. And then I go through and I outline in Scrivener using the little note card things, and I outline each scene very, very briefly. Like, I'm not doing elaborate outlines. I'm doing like they meet at the cafe and something bad happens kind of summary of that scene. So once I have those, then I can see overall what the flow might be. And I have a character brainstorming document, and I might have a scenes or plot brainstorming document as well, if there are key points that I know I want to hit. And then it's writing time, you know, and then I know what to do.
So how much of taking, so you're not writing full-length novels at this point. Right now you're working on novellas.
And short stories.
And short stories. So let's say with a novella, how many words? 30,000?
20 to 30,000, yeah.
How much of your time to write that 20 to 30,000 words is spent on the planning versus the writing versus the next stage, which would be the edit and then getting it out into the world?
They're almost the same, actually. It's currently, for my novellas, it's about 20 hours each stage.
Okay.
20 hours in the planning, 20 hours in the writing, and 20 hours in the editing. And then the publication side, that part's actually a lot quicker for me because, again, I've got a couple really good tools and some really good processes. Getting the work polished is the hardest part, and then the releasing it part. I mean, eventually that does add up to about 20 hours a story once you've got it launched. But yeah, so I'd say about 80 hours of work per short story or novella. And actually a short story and novella are not that much different, because the only difference really comes in the writing time, because you don't need quite as much words.
Okay, so what do you do? And you're still working with a lot of clients, and you're building with Eileen and I the Creative Academy, which I know for a fact takes up a lot of hours of your life. What do you do, and what would you recommend to someone who says, which I hear a lot from the people I'm working with, is I just don't have time to write. You clearly have, and I know that you don't sleep as much as the average bear, but
no, more. I am, yeah, other than like the odd weird week around full moon, maybe, I'm good. I actually am religious about protecting my 8 hours at a minimum, because that lets me function at a pretty high capacity for the rest of the time.
Okay, so how do you make those hours, those 80 hours, to get a book in when you've got all this other stuff?
I think the word you use there, make, is the key word, because you're not ever going to have time to do anything. You have to make time for the things that matter. And so I am very conscious about scheduling and how I manage the pieces. And I know for some people, they do best with, well, I'm going to spend 1 hour every single day, working on this and move things forward. And for me, I've never found that to be the best, because I can kind of ride the energy. So I need a certain amount of time scheduled in regularly to make sure I'm getting into my creative sort of headspace.
Right.
But I need blocks of time to make some real progress, so that I don't feel like things are taking years. So I think short, measured blocks consistently, with the occasional spike or sprint, we like to call that, to really get things done. And the writing phase is for me at least, it's the one that needs to be compressed the most. So when I'm doing plot development or character development, all those initial stages of stories, then I can do that, an hour a day or whatever. And then when I hit the writing, I need to dive in, and I need to have not too many distractions, if at all possible. So I tend to do that in batches. But if I know I'm doing scenes 1 to 3 in one weekend and scenes 4 to 6 in another weekend, then that lets me break it up into chunks and see real progress of how I'm doing. And then I go back to the little bits each day for the editing and the publication side of things.
So would you say that, some people rebel or recoil against scheduling time when they're going to be creative? Like you can't force the muse to show up when the muse isn't just here. Dear, oh dear. So is there a time, I'm going to have to edit this out, I'm afraid, because of that darned thing happening. Sorry.
It sounded kind of magical.
Yeah, it did sound kind of magical, but now, so, okay, let me go back. So it sounds like you're able to schedule in that time that you're going to be creative. And I know a lot of people, and including me, sometimes it's like, well, you can't tell me that the muse is going to come on this particular weekend when I've set time to write. Or can you? Is that, like, in terms of making a plan, which is what you're talking about, so that, to get the work done, is scheduling creativity actually legitimate and possible?
I think it's kind of a careful line. You can't schedule the creativity. You don't know when the moment where that switch goes off and suddenly the words are pouring out. You can't schedule the exact moment that's going to happen, but you have to make the space for it to happen. Otherwise, it definitely can't. And, our lives are so busy. We have so much digital input. We have so many sounds and sights and stimulation coming at us from every channel. Every quiet minute we have, we're opening Facebook or whatever on our phone. We're never quiet. We're never still. And so scheduling a block of time that is reserved for your creativity means it has a chance to show up. And it might not show up by default at first, but you give it some time and you'll get used to it, and you'll find that the more often you open that door, the more likely that creativity is to walk through it. And so for me, I'm not always able to sit down and write during what I've termed my writing time. And so I actually stopped calling it writing time on my calendar as a rule. I call it author time. And so I can be doing whatever I'm inspired to do at that moment that's going to further my author career.
Right.
And it might be that maybe I didn't sleep well the night before. Maybe I've got a lot of other stuff going on that's occupying the good part of my brain.
Yeah.
And then maybe all I do is update my social media profile pictures across the things. Or, I have a file of what I call the 15-minute tasks, which are just random administrative stuff that has to be done. And I will do those with that time. If I can't get the words to come, or I'm feeling frustrated, rather than sitting there feeling frustrated for the whole hour I've blocked off to be creative, I will do one thing that will move me forward, so I don't feel like I failed, that I don't feel like I wasted that time. I think the positive feelings and the positive forward momentum is really important. And
it's critical. Yeah.
Yeah. And all those things have to get done. So, if you're able to get used to making a date with yourself and showing up and putting in some effort, at a certain point, you've demonstrated to yourself, your subconscious, your inner, whatever voice is talking to you in your head, you've shown it, you're serious about this.
Yeah.
You are showing up every day, you are taking steps, and eventually whatever it is that's stopping you from doing that writing will chill out or back off or open up or whatever, and it'll let the words come out again.
Yeah.
And I've had periods of years where I haven't actively been writing, but I've sure been working towards my eventual author career, and setting the stage for what I'm doing now. This didn't all happen overnight. This has been actually 20 years in the making. So I think that's a really important point. And
I love, because I know this part about you. First of all, I love that you call that in your calendar now author time. That makes a whole lot of sense. And yeah, I know that for those 40 books that you're writing, the 40 stories, one of the things that you did in advance was create all the covers, because as part of your process, having that visual is helpful to you in the writing piece, right? And you do have a particular, exceptionally good design skill, but even someone like me could still be doing something like that. And in fact, for me, it's coming up with couplets of words that are my inspiration to sit down and start writing when I'm not in that place where I could be writing long form. Anyway, that's fabulous. So you've mentioned a few tools. You've mentioned Scrivener, and you've mentioned what else have you mentioned in terms
emotional thesaurus? It's all in the One Stop for Writers tool if you want it all online. And then I actually have some physical books, because when I'm traveling and stuff, when I take those vacations, we go camping and we go to a tiny little town in Mexico. We don't always have internet. So I do have a couple of hard copy tools so that doesn't slow down the process. I'll take my notebook and some graph paper and those tools with me, and just use the quiet time. The ideas tend to pour in when there's no email interference and work-related stuff popping up.
Yeah, I was going to say that's another. So that's definitely a big takeaway. Right in those little moments, not to be hopping on Facebook and distracting yourself, but going into that place where you can actually continue that focus. So, what about for people who are at that place where they've been thinking about their story, their book? They know they want to finish it, and they're struggling with making the space to get it done. What would you say would be the first steps to kill it like Crystal?
Nice. I want a t-shirt like that, or a button or something. So a couple suggestions. I'm going to bust out a visual here. If you are totally distracted by all of the other things that live in your computer, this is a little keyboard that's actually Bluetooth, and I can put my iPhone in it, or I can put, oh look, there's us.
Yeah, there we are.
I can put my iPhone in it. I can put a tablet in it. And so then you can pull up a Google Doc or whatever you want to write in. You can type right in your notes document if you want. You can bring that up so that all you can see is the words you're currently working on. You're not going back to revise when you're typing into a phone like that. You're not getting email. Like, I mean, turn off your notifications while you've got your phone up there, put it on do not disturb mode just for an hour or whatever. And I think that's really valuable. I actually took off social media and my email from my phone. I removed it a few months ago, and I have never been happier or more productive. That way, when I'm checking those things, is because I chose to sit down and check those things. Right. And I've got all the tools at my disposal to actually answer properly and to focus on that. And I'm not tempted to buzz through things and then forget to deal with them later. So for me, that just freed up that as a tool for creativity. And there's lots of little devices you can use that work like that are specifically for writers to help you get the words on the page. But Scrivener now syncs with phones, and Eon Timeline just released an iOS app. So if you use timelining software for your writing, you can actually pull stuff up on your phone if you need it. And yeah, you can just go for it without all of the distractions. And if you are always working on your laptop, there's a couple of programs that will prevent you from being able to do anything else. And I can't remember, there's one I can't remember the name of, but the icon is a little skull, and it effectively just kills your internet connection and stuff, so you can't do anything but write. Yeah. So I think that is a huge tool. And the other thing I would recommend as far as keeping things moving is something that Eileen uses and talks about a lot, actually, which is you just keep going. If something changes for your character in the moment and it requires changes to a previous chapter or all the previous chapters, you keep writing as if the new reality is true, and you don't go back in the moment to fix it. You write all the way to the end, and then you go back to fix it, so that you're fixing a completed draft, not spending 5 years revising the same things over and over and over again and never finishing your story. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Making a plan with Crystal Stranaghan, aka CJ Hunt, who is well on her way to writing 40 stories by the time she's 40, and keeping all of those clients happy, getting everybody's books self-published beautifully and effectively. And then even though I talk to you virtually every day, every time I talk to you, there's some new little thing that you say that makes me go, oh yeah, right, that might be a great thing to try. I'm sure anybody who's been watching has got at least 3 new great ideas, and everybody's got to get back to their writing. So I know that you have in your schedule, Crystal, a certain amount of time for this conversation. I think we've hit that time. And I want to say thank you for making time for this, to share how it is that you make time to be working on this big project, your 40 by 40, and doing all the things that you do to support authors and writers at all stages of on their publication path or path to publication. So thanks for being with us, and I will see you over in the Creative Academy.
You will. And I do want to add one little thing, just so that everybody leaving here takes away what their next action is, because that is the secret to getting things done, is knowing what your next thing is, so you don't have to figure that out. So your next thing, your homework, is to go away and make that first date with yourself in your calendar. Actually write it in the calendar, and then come and talk to us. Tell us all about what you're getting done and what you're working on. And look forward to seeing you around the Creative Academy.
Excellent. We'll see you there. Bye. Bye. Are you a member of the Creative Academy yet? Join us today and unlock a wealth of resources, masterclasses, feedback opportunities, and community events designed to help you reach the next step in your writing journey. No matter what stage you're at, we've got a helping hand to guide you along the way. Check out our free resource room if you'd like to get a taste of how we can help you reach your writing and publishing goals. Thank you for bringing us along on your writing and publishing journey. Crystal, Eileen, and I hope to see you around the Creative Academy soon.